To a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.
Hi folks, and welcome back to Midweek through a Scottish Prism. Nice to see you. Hope you and yours are well. We have an interesting programme for you today. Well, we hope that everyone's interesting. But can I just start with the old housekeeping? If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please do hit the bell. And if you like what you see in here, please let us know and hit that like button. It all helps with the algorithms. Today, the title of our show, as you can see, is Celtic Connections. And it's there's no fiddlers here. It's pure politics, as always. And so I got from the representative nations of the British Isles, with the exception of England, I have representatives. And we may as well start with our home base. We have our very own Lloyd Quinan, SNP man for boy and man, SNP man, ex-member of the Scottish Parliament, ex-weatherman and STV, documentary player. I mean, what does this man not do? Mr. Quinan, how are you?
I'm very well. Nice to see you, Roddy. Nice to be here.
You will send me the check for that introduction, I trust.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Some man. And over there from in our Irish cousins, we've got John Moran back with us, the foreign editor of the Irish Press Foreign Desk. John, my friend, nice to see you again. How are you? And how's things in Ireland?
I'm good. It's all good here. Lots happening politically.
Oh, that's why you're here, my friend. That's why you're here. That's what we're here to chat about. And from down there in the valleys, we've got Neil McEvoy, the leader of the Propel Party of Wales, a new political party, but Neil's no stranger to politics. Neil, welcome to your debut on Through a Scottish Prism. Lovely to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for the invite. Looking forward to it.
This is like the Six Nations without England and France, that's all. Maybe we should have brought them along as observers. And as the
Three nations with Irish surnames.
Well, there you go. Well, you are the senior service, after all. You're the senior Celts, I think. If we should maybe brought Roger, a registered historian, because it could be the Welsh again. I think we're the babies of the Celts, are we not? I'm not sure. No doubt someone will tell us in the comments. They love to tell you, don't they? But the thing is that what we all have, we have so much in common as Celts and Celtic nations. We're on the British Isles, and looking at it, we've all got one common denominator that we're trying to rid ourselves of, and that's London influence and London politics. And we're all at different stages of development as nations on our road to independence, or in the case of Ireland, reunification and getting rid of bringing the 6 occupied counties into the whole of the island of Ireland. So generally what we're hoping to do is get a chat here about what's going on, where we're at, and see if we can find some common grounds and common interests. So, without further ado, Lloyd, if I could start with you. As I did in my introduction, you're a long-term, like myself, a long-time man in the nationalist campaign. We've come leaps and bounds since when you and I joined the party at first. But how would you sum up where we are just now in that quest?
We have come a long way, Roddy, and we've had our ups and downs, but my own feeling at the moment is that the concept of independence, the feeling for independence, is considerably stronger amongst the population, amongst the people, than it is with our elected representatives at the moment. The reasons for this, I think, are many, not least straightforward human venality, but also the Scottish National Party has lost its way. It's lost its vision of where we need to be. The idea, the visualization of seeing the Saltire flying outside the New York UN headquarters is lost. And I think they've lost their way in terms of the focus of what they should be doing, which is constantly to, as far as I'm concerned, challenge the legitimacy of Westminster. But at the moment, we're not there. But at the same time, we have to be positive. The opinion polls are telling us the SNP is losing ground, but independence has gained ground, enormous amount of ground. That's a positive. We need a date for an event, a constitutional convention to move us forward.
Yeah, and absolutely, I couldn't agree with you more. And we'll dive into that more as the programme goes on. John, in my arrogance, should I say, back in 2014, I would have gone down to William Hill's and put money on Scotland being the first one to break away and become an independent country before Ireland became reunified. I'm now of the opinion our friends, our cousins over in Ireland are going to lead the charge, because it's getting closer by the day, is it not, that border poll?
It is, there's no doubt, because we had a huge election in the North, council elections, and Sinn Fein became the biggest party after the elections, and more to the point, for the first time ever, there was a nationalist majority over the unionist votes. There were more nationalists than unionists for the first time ever. I mean, that is huge.
Yep.
Now, Sinn Féin is not talking too much about that. They don't want to frighten the horses, and they're taking it quite slowly. But if you have a majority in the North who are of a nationalist frame of mind now, in a part of Ireland that was cut off to get as much of Ireland while having a majority of unionists at the same time, this is massive.
It is, and it's getting to exciting times. There's more things again I'd like to go into with you, John. Neil, Wales, was always sort of thinking, well, they were going to be last in the chase to be independent, and I don't mean that disrespectfully, because you've been more colonised than the rest of us put together. But in recent times, with Cymru and parties like your own, things seem to be moving at a pace and down there in Wales, and you seem to be saying, no, we're coming with you, boys.
I'd like to say that, but I feel we've got a long way to go. Yes, Cymru is developing well. There have been some challenges really within that organisation, and I mean, the movement we have here is still not fully inclusive of all political parties who we call ourselves sovereignists. We want a sovereign Welsh nation, and so yes, really is not there yet in terms of including everybody. And I suppose the Senedd, the Parliament, it just isn't fit for purpose. It's a devolutionist Parliament, and I was a former member of Plaid Cymru and in the Parliament, but I mean, they're very much in Labour's pocket there, and they're almost frightened of their own shadow, really. So you've seen a development with Propel starting up. There's another party as well, Gwlad. I think it's a Sovereign Party. There are a couple of other sort of small offshoots being born now, really because of the dissatisfaction with the status quo. Because we've looked at Scotland really enviously, maybe other than in the recent past. And our politicians who are elected in the Senedd, they're just not at the races, really. And what we want to do is build, I suppose, a sovereign movement. And we want our parliament to be fit for purpose. We're actually talking now about trying to set up a convention, but at a grassroots level. So getting buy-in from people out there, because we held a public meeting on the Constitution of Wales, which I thought was going to be really dry. I didn't think anyone was going to turn up, but we had a really good turnout. And especially after COVID, there's a real interest in how we're governed now, and the lack of freedoms across the board, freedoms we've lost, really. I think that there's a whole different dynamic now. I don't think it's left and right any longer either. It's more authoritarianism versus people that are seeking free choice, really.
That was, when you talked about new parties forming through dissatisfaction, we had the exact same in Scotland. I mean, up until 2019, there's only ever been the SNP, and then we got a raft of parties. Now, some of them have fallen by the wayside, but we've now got 3 still going. So it's similar territory there. I've just, a word to the wise for our cousins in Wales. If you could get Ryan Reynolds and Rob McEvoy on side from Wrexham Football Club, you'll be independent before any of us. An absolute phenomenon. You've got to get them on board.
It's been a great pleasure to watch Wrexham. When they got promoted, I even had a pint of Wrexham lager. I'm not really a lager drinker. But,
it shows you the power of media and the power of publicity.
Absolutely.
Actually, and that is, I think, well, certainly in Scotland and Wales is a problem we've got where we're swamped by the British media. In Ireland, at least, there is, John, an independent media, and in the north, they can get access to another viewpoint rather than the British viewpoint.
Sure, yeah. Well, we get all the British newspapers over here with Irish variations. I'm sure you get the same in Scotland. You might as well be getting an English newspaper at times. Mm-hmm. So we're always careful of what we get from the British newspapers when it's about a sensitive issue, you know, like a majority. Like some of my newspapers have been arguing against a 50% plus one as it being not enough because they saw the majority coming, but that's going nowhere. Mm. The unionists would grab that themselves if they could get their hands on it.
Yeah, well, unionists love to grab anything and get their hands on. That's the truth. But, you know, Neil touched on it about a constitutional convention or a convention. Lloyd, you've been talking about it as well, but I was listening to Mary Lou MacDonald, and she's talking the exact same. It's time to get citizen assemblies up and running throughout Ireland. So it seems to be that is a theme running through the independence-seeking parties.
Oh, very much so. But in fact, Sinn Fein had a very successful set of, I'm not sure exactly what they called them, but they were public engagement meetings right across both the north and the rest of Ireland. Very successful, very well attended, and indeed a number of people who have previously been known as prominent faces and figures from the unionist community, not necessarily politicians. I think in Jimmy Nisbet particularly, coming out and saying the things they did. Adrian Dunbar as well. I think this is indicative of a serious change that's happening, particularly in the six counties, and I think people see what I believe is going to happen if, with a Sinn Féin majority at the next election in Ireland, combined with the majority they have in the north at a council level, then I think change and rapid change will come, and will come if, you know, there's a terrible thing with British politicians, and I include in that Scottish politicians. Ireland is somewhere over to the side. We don't pay attention to it for a number of different historical reasons. What I'm urging people to think is, what's happening in Ireland give us an opportunity to get together, have a convention, recognise what's happening throughout these so-called British Isles, the changes which are happening, and how Scotland plays its part directly in that, not just for our own benefit. The focus of the world is going to be on Ireland, therefore on Britain, as we see the last part of the island of Ireland become part of an independent Ireland. Then the focus is on what next for Britain. We have to be prepared for that.
Do you think, Lloyd, there is anything in Grassroots from the three Celtic nations getting together for that time, as opposed to, I mean, there's the politicians, they've got the what I don't know what it's called, the British Isles Council, whatever the heck they call it, the politicians, but is there any room for some kind of umbrella Celtic organisation, do you think, of Grassroots, that is?
I think it's very, very important that we make connections with each other. I think it's what I've done throughout all my time in politics, is the necessity to understand the viewpoint of others who are in a similar circumstance to us. Now, whether or not some combined Celtic force would be of use within the direct political arena, I'm not so certain. But one of the things I've learned over the years is building and supporting people's morale is vitally important across borders. When people see on our marches the flags of Catalonia, the flags of the Flemings, of the Welsh, this is a positive thing. I think we need to be talking to each other, but whether a formalised structure, you know, we've all got our own problems at the moment. We're rebuilding to some degree. Propel is rebuilding. Alba's rebuilding. Hopefully the SNP will rebuild. Whether or not we have the energy, the ability, the numbers of people to set up another structure, I'm not certain, Roddy, but we have to be talking to each other. And in some ways, what you're doing with Prism is beginning that.
Oh, we try. Down there in Wales, Neil, within the Yes Cymru umbrella, or all under one banner, is there harmony, peace and harmony?
No, because the one at the moment, the all under one banner, it's one banner which is only bizarrely unionist parties and Plaid Cymru. It's really odd. I mean, we don't get on a platform. Other pro Sovereign Wales parties don't get on a platform. Plaid Cymru, which is essentially devolutionist, to be honest, and we get Labour politicians speaking and Green politicians. It's just really odd at the moment. We're making progress. We're invited to a panel in September, which is good. But it's all a bit. I mean, it's all a bit bizarre, really. Because I don't know why in our neck of the woods we're involving Labour people whose party is absolutely opposed to a sovereign Wales. And you look at my party, Propel. I was the first politician in Wales to even debate a sovereign Wales, and the first to put it to a vote in the Senedd. And I mean, that took 19 years, believe it or not. It's unbelievable that I was the first one to do it. And so I think we have our own challenges here, which I think we're starting to make progress. But I think we're just too wrapped up. I mean, we're just here. It's a one-party sub-state. I mean, we're just so wrapped up in the Labour Party at every level. And I think there's a certain naivety as well within the movement, because we've got a First Minister who sometimes makes quite nationalist noises, but he's a dyed-in-the-wool unionist. And yet, I think we're way behind where Scotland are in terms of what you did with Labour with the SNP, because down here they're a lot more nimble and a lot more dangerous. And I think we've a way to go, really. And yes, and all under one banner really does need to be one banner which is inclusive. In Wales, we don't even have that yet. And it seems to be a really woke politics as well being pushed, which I'm on the left, absolutely on the left, always have been, but I'm not woke.
You're among friends.
And that's a bit of a problem, I mean, to be honest, I don't care, whatever you want to call yourself. And, this whole trans debate, which is just ridiculously huge compared to the amount of people that it affects. And I'm very cynical of that whole part of things, really, because they've done a good job in disrupting, I think, healthy movements.
Yeah,
there's a reason for that, isn't there?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the things you're saying, you feel that the main party of independence, Plaid, has gone too devolutionist. Exactly the same in Scotland. A lot of people believe that the SNP have become devolutionist.
Can I just? Do you mind if I chime in there? I mean, when I was in the Senedd, the Welsh Parliament, I remember one afternoon, I thought I'd go over on the First Minister, because he was really, the former one was really good at answering questions, going through notes, very calm and collected, former barrister. And I nailed him, and he lost where he was in his notes. And, I walked out thinking 1-0. And I got called in by Plaid Cymru and told by the leadership to be more respectful to the Labour First Minister. And I mean, I was told as well that if I wanted to get things done for my constituency, that I had to work through the Labour group. And I was told that I shouldn't trip up the Welsh government, Labour government, because that wasn't working in good faith. And I'm just, all these things were thrown at me. And in the end, I just looked around the room and thought, what am I doing? Because in Wales, what we have is a conveyor belt of career politicians now. They can earn a good living in the Senedd. One time I was just told to put my feet up. What are you doing? You're on £70,000 a year. It's a job for life. What are you up to? Why are you making such a fuss on things? And I thought I was elected to change things. But Plaid Cymru it's captured, really, would be the term. And captured by careerism, captured by vested interests. Lobbyists have a huge influence in Cardiff Bay. And I mean, I remember uncovering a dodgy contract, and I can say it's dodgy because it was found to be the case, and told to leave it alone by Plaid Cymru. And we've got a lot of work to do in this neck of the woods, and I think I'm really glad now that there are other parties. We're talking to other parties as well, by the way, because it's really interesting. I think something's happening, because you guys are talking about a convention. We're talking about a convention. We're also talking about a general platform for the Welsh elections. We're calling it Free Wales, Cymru Rydd. instead of all separate parties, because I think Plaid Cymru is just completely captured. So we need to find an alternative.
I take it Plaid Cymru are not into a Wales United election.
The Plaid Cymru are really into just propping up the government. They always do a deal really cheaply, and nothing changes.
Yeah, it does have a certain familiar ring to it. Yes, John.
No, the Sinn Fein in Ireland will not be going for devolution. That would be seen as kicking to touch. What they'll be going for is a united Ireland, although it will be done in a softly approach, so as not to antagonize the unionists. We want to bring them along as much as we can. But the attitude of Sinn Fein will be for a united Ireland, and they will be looking for a poll on it within the next 10 years.
Yeah, I mean, I heard Mary Lou McDonald talking about what we need to do is prepare now. She's saying to both the governments in Dublin and in London. But in Ireland, they want to have engagement, preparation and planning. And all the Brexiteers at Westminster went, what's that? Preparation? So yes, they're definitely wanting to do it the proper way, linked with citizen assemblies. And they want to hear it from the ground up.
Absolutely.
It's refreshing, John. As I say, it's a different way of doing politics, it would seem, in Ireland, John.
Well, it's a new thing that developed a number of years ago, where we had citizens' assemblies on various subjects, and we found them very, very useful for elucidating the main points that were of interest to the people at large. And you got all the topics covered by the time you finished the country. So you knew where you were in the debate, and you could have a sensible debate. There was no little stray fact could come in and undermine you. You would have covered it all before you started. So you could proceed from a solid base. That's the idea behind them.
It's a great idea, Lloyd, because I'm a great advocate, believing, and I'm sure I believe it's the same for Wales and for the 6 counties, is if you play by the Westminster and British rules, you're never going to win, because those rules change even when you don't know they change.
Well, it's the big lesson for all of us from Sinn Fein is Sinn Fein don't fight on other people's ground. They don't fight on the British ground. They have a clear understanding of who they are up against, what they are up against, and they know you concede at no point. You retain very clearly a fixed idea of where you want to go. And I think, having watched politics in Ireland for a very, very long time, sticking to that principle has got them to where they are now. And I think it's a lesson for us. But on the issue of the assemblies, we claim in Scotland that we have an open democracy that everybody commits and everybody can contribute to. Everything we do in our parliament supposedly is subject to consultation. What we've discovered in the past 2 or 3 years, that these consultations are entirely and completely a chimera. They are controlled, manipulated to deliver the government's policy. They are not there to deliver what people believe. Had we had citizens' assemblies, for instance, on the gender recognition reform, then I think it would have turned out a very, very different situation from the situation we have. If we have citizens' assemblies about the concept of juryless trials, and indeed we should get some people over from Ireland to tell us about juryless trials, then I think the government would have to listen. But we have a government, Roddy, you know it, I know it. For the past 8 years, they're not interested in listening. What they're interested in doing is maintaining their own position. Very similar to what Neil was saying about Plaid Cymru. The citizens' assemblies are, I think, an essential part of what comes either prior to or post an independence convention. We have to weave it into the structure of how we deliver what the people want, because at the moment we've had 8 years of people of the party not listening to the people. We need to get back to that. 2014 was a great listening exercise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was indeed. Neil, you I'm sure, going to say similar things. Because
Yeah,
you
I-
can't.
I-
Wales will not get
I-
independent by working by Westminster's rules, will it?
I mean, I try and not be too negative, but I mean, for us, it's about going forward really, because I could sit here and moan all afternoon, but what we're looking at is maybe not even. I mentioned a convention earlier, but what I'm interested in doing and what others are interested in doing, it's just discussing the constitution. So how are we governed, and how the constitution relates to everyday life as well. I think it's absolutely key. I mean, we've got a huge housing crisis in Wales, huge, which is exacerbated by unbelievably the Welsh Parliament. I mean, this is quite shocking, but the Conservatives are actually more progressive in Westminster than the Labour Party is in Cardiff. It's incredible. So we want to talk about what a future Wales will look like. What rights will you have? I mean, I've always been very blasé about supporting devolution of everything right now as quickly as possible. But I mean, I was the only politician in Wales prosecuted under COVID legislation, and for leaving my house, by the way. So I know who didn't leave their house. And but prior to that, I'd been suspended by the Welsh Parliament despite CCTV proving I didn't do as they'd said. It was unbelievable. The so-called Standards Committee in the Welsh Parliament refused to watch They refused to watch the CCTV. They said they already had enough witnesses. And then what was really weird for me was going into criminal court. And I mean, I can see Lloyd's face there, but Lloyd, honestly, that kind of stuff happens all the time here with the one-party sub-state. But what was really weird for me, going into the English and Welsh legal system in criminal court, and there were rules. I mean, I think the history of the North of Ireland is different there, but for my particular issue with the COVID prosecution, there were rules set in place, and it was the only place I'd been treated fairly in the last 5 years back then, and this was in 2021, and I thought, my God, if the Labour Party, because it is the Labour Party here, had been governing criminal justice, I'm pretty sure I'd been found guilty, to be honest. You know, and so that was a sort of a real wake-up call for me about rushing ahead and actually making things worse than what we have right now. So what we want to do is take a step back and look at a constitution, look at what rights we want in law, and how we achieve that. And when we then go to people and say, look, we want the sovereign Wales going forward, this is what it could look like. These are the rights that you will have as a citizen of Wales. And there are some colleagues who are sort of more, I suppose, Confederate-like, if you like. But what we're about really in Propel is just starting a debate, because I mean, we've had a parliament for 24 years with no real debate. I mean, as I said, it took 18 years for me to put the question about a sovereign Wales to the parliament in a debate. And so we're taking a step back, looking at the constitution, speaking to lawyers about what will it look like, and trying to get buy-in off the public. And I think for something which could be seen to be a very dry topic, people are actually very interested in it. And for us, it's about the freedom agenda, a free Wales where people are able to choose their own destiny, our own destiny.
Yeah, talking of your sort of.
Sorry, I was found not guilty, by the way.
I'm sure you were.
The judge called the prosecution appalling because there was no complainant and there were no witnesses in court.
Well, I've got a thing going on in my blog just now, which is I've got letters from Wales coming up by Alan Job, right, who writes excellent stuff. And he's put one out this week where the Food Securities Bill, he said, he didn't want to talk up Tories, but it was a great bill. But they started playing Westminster politics with it because, and again, it's very familiar with Scotland, because it was proposed by the Tories, it was just voted down. We called that, I've forgotten that wee pipsqueak's name, Lloyd, in North Glasgow. What was it called again?
Oh, which particular one?
The one who said, we just vote against SNP legislation for the sake of it.
Yeah. Can I just tell you like one anecdote there, similar to what you're talking about? When I put forward the Sovereign Wales, when I put it to the vote, I couldn't even get the whole Plaid Cymru group to support me. So I'm proposing a Sovereign Wales, and because it was me putting it forward, they couldn't vote for it. It was really weird.
Alapa had the same problem in Westminster with a nearly day motion by Neil Handy to move the legislation to allow referendums to come out of the Scottish Parliament, and only 3 SNP members signed it as well, although it's their party policy, because it was by the Alapa party. That kind of stuff. John, the one thing that Ireland has shown is that when the nationalist movement needs to be united, that's how you get results.
Oh, it is. There's no doubt about it. You know, the organisation of Sinn Fein is very, very tight. All the commentators speak about it, all the political commentators. Their organisation, for example, in the local elections recently, they could count on a load of people to go north from the south to canvass for them, and vice versa when there are elections down here. I mean, there's no other political party on the island who has that. I mean, Sinn Fein is the only All-Ireland party, so they can help each other in that way. And it's bringing them nothing but huge results. They had one bad result that was about 3 years ago in the local elections, but it was on a very low turnout. There was 11% in some constituencies. So people misread that. But the following election, they did tremendously, and there was this massive Sinn Féin surge. They didn't have enough candidates to get the votes that were offered them.
Because if they'd had enough candidates, they'd have probably been in the government by now.
That's it. There's no doubt about it.
So
but the mistake won't be made again.
I was just going to ask you, they'll have enough candidates. I mean, I'll volunteer for that one. If you need one, I'll come over. I could maybe do a Irish accent. I don't know. I think I could get away with that. In fact, a lot of people who have met when I've been in Ireland have been thinking I'm from up north because it's a similar accent, but we'll not go into accents. We could be in here all day. We'll get more comments about accents than anything else.
I know.
Lloyd, where do you see the movement now, what we have to do to move forward? Because certainly in Scotland, we're stagnated.
We're in a period of stagnation, but then again, we have to look at the incredible events that have happened the past couple of months. You know, you have the leader of the Scottish National Party and First Minister of the country. 1 week, I'm here for the long haul, and the following Thursday, I can't take it anymore, I'm leaving. That has sent shockwaves through the SNP, it's sent shockwaves through the other parties. And then we had a leadership election, which was, you know, at best gerrymandered would be the only way to describe it. So I think there are people whose morale is down, but we have to remind ourselves support for independence is still close to or above 50%. We have to take it out of the hands of the SNP. The SNP have to be forced by their membership to speak to ALPA, to speak to the ISP, and more importantly, the broader Yes movement. And if they're not prepared to do that, then somebody somewhere, maybe in Craigmillar, has to think in terms of drawing a convention together. The SNP can't stand outside of the movement for much longer without making themselves, and this is where it will hurt them, making themselves an electoral liability. And when it comes down to it, because of the nature of exactly what Neil's talked about, what I experienced when I was a member of the Scottish Parliament, when you play to the British rules, and remember that the rules of the Senate and the rules of the Scottish Parliament were made by the British. When you play by their rules, there are many, many traps. The first trap is the trap that creates a professional class. That professional class then becomes entirely divorced from the population, and hence you have the Minister for Independence telling us during the week that if you go on independence marches, you're frankly wasting your time. Negative, yes, but out of it comes the phoenix, as it has done in Ireland. You know, let's be positive here. There are broader issues as well. There's similar issues arising in the other independence movements in the autonomous countries in Europe, all of whom have had fantastic election results over the past week. We have to take heart from that because in some ways, there's a zeitgeist, and it's beyond even our own politics. I was reading the other night about the history of the national movement in Scotland, and it was bizarre what happened in Scotland at the time of the 1968 riots in France and that whole youth movement that was developing across Europe had its knock-on effect in Scotland. Membership of the Scottish National Party went through the roof. I'm slightly off topic here, but what I'm really saying is the people will deliver, but we have to fight on our own ground, and we have to convince our politicians that they've been fighting on somebody else's ground for too many years now, and they need to draw back, analyse the circumstances, recognise who is your adversary. Is it Westminster alone, or are there other things at play?
Yeah, Neil, I'm sure you could give me a similar answer to a similar problem.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I think there's no point in repeating it. Really, the idea of a professional class is create a new bureaucracy with their self-interest is in the status quo. But I think what Lloyd has said there, he's right, and something is happening out there, and I think I can't put my finger on it yet. But I mean, parties are being set up now. People are talking, and I mean, there is an anti-establishment backlash ready to be harvested. Our problem is that we have to do it from a Welsh perspective and not from a UK nationalist perspective, because I mean, last time we had UKIP getting lots of seats in Wales, and I think what we need to do is set out a stall of sovereignty, rights, and I'd say, to be honest, where we are, just a well-run parliament, which actually acts in people's interests. Because I mean, my recollection from the SNP was it 2007 when he took over? Yeah.
No.
I mean, the administration seemed to be amazingly positive in terms of what they were doing, and we've never had that. And if we could get some kind of representation in the parliament, and at some point a government working in the interests of the people of Wales, then I think that could be the trigger. But at the moment, we're nowhere near that. So a lot of the pressure has to come from outside of the parliament, and with activism and I think moves to talk about a constitution. What kind of country do we want to live in? And I think that's absolutely key, because where we're heading now, I mean, one of the reasons I'm still active in politics is because my son's 3.5 years of age. My daughter's 16, but my son is 3. And I mean, I don't want to bequeath him, if you like, at such a young age, the absolute, I mean, what we have right now, and I can only see it getting worse. So there's one option, and that's to fight, and fight cleverly, fight hard, and win elections, and win hearts and minds. We have a public meeting every week, not every month, in Cardiff, Propel. We're active here, and we're called. I don't know if you saw the riots in Ely recently in Cardiff. Did you see that on the news?
Yeah.
No, I didn't.
I mean, so it was waiting to happen. So we're organising a public meeting out there with the communities. We're connected with the communities, and we're very much a working class party. I would say with our fingers on the pulse more so than elected politicians in the parliament. Although we do have one council seat, which was a start. So at least now we're on the map.
John, what's obvious for any nationalist movement is to have good leaders. That vitally important figurehead. Now, I think the Irish have been a wee bit greedy. You get two wonderful women over there, in Michelle and Mary Lou. Now, can you not help out your Celtic cousins and lease us one, or give us one and a buyback or something?
Well, I can remember looking over envious at Scotland and Margot MacDonald all those years ago. But no, we have been quite lucky. I mean, Mary Lou is ideal. I mean, she's homely, yet efficient and passionate, and all of the things that Irish people like. She's as straight as a die. So she is a big asset to have in your party. But you also have to have all these people at all levels, from the common at the very bottom all the way up, doing their own little bit. And we do things like, in Ireland, we do things like the common would meet other common in other areas, like visit Belfast and they'd visit here. So you get connections that way. It's all throughout the organization. Connections are knitted into it, but you do have to have the good leadership. And we've been very lucky to have good and brave leaders in the past, and long may it continue.
Yeah, indeed. And Ireland have, include some of the best British generals like Montgomery were from the island of Ireland.
Right. Yes, yes.
And
Yeah. Wellington, don't forget Wellington.
Now Mr. Glasgow, I saw him at the Battle of Waterloo with his traffic going on.
There you go.
Magnificent.
He was baptized across the road from where I'm sitting in Dublin.
There you go. So these are facts that you don't get anywhere else, folks. You know, every day's a school day when you're on Prism. If I can, I'm playing for time here, Lloyd, but I'll try and get my thread again because I've managed to confuse myself to hell.
Roddy, I was just going to say, I think.
Thank God.
You know, I'm a huge admirer of Mary Lou McDonald and most especially Michelle O'Neill. And as John characterised it, it's authenticity. And authenticity wins in politics. It's as simple and straightforward as that.
Yeah.
We've got we have a lack of authenticity because, back to what I said, our politicians in Scotland have moved on to the British ground. They are operating within their rules, within their, what you would want for a better word is their traditions. And as a result of that, their mentality becomes a British mentality, and they lose the straightforward steel and vision that Michelle O'Neill and Mary Lou McDonald have, because they don't fight on other people's ground. They have a clear vision of where they want to be, and they will not be shifted from that. So their area is strategy and tactics within that. Whereas I see no strategy, I see no tactics from the Scottish government other than the maintenance of their own privilege and power. I think all SNP members of the Scottish and the Westminster Parliament should be made to watch an hour of Mary Lou McDonald and Michelle O'Neill each day until Scotland becomes independent.
Yeah, well, I would go along with an hour of Boris, an hour of Starmer, and an hour of Rishi Sunak would make us get independent a hell of a lot quicker than watching the lovely Mary Lou and the lovely Michelle.
They might learn how to actually take the British on if they listen to the two of them.
I went to West Belfast. Can I just say, went to West Belfast in 2017, and it was a real eye opener. I mean, the organisation, the connectivity between constituents and politicians, the lack of egos. I found that really, really interesting as well. Being used to really, people that wouldn't speak to you sometimes, whereas nobody was above the cause. That was my impression walking away, and just very, very impressed. Really, I tried to talk about it when I got back to Wales, but where I was then, there wasn't a great deal of interest.
But do you not think
the movement, they call it? You know, when you're working for the movement. The Republican movement, you know, so you knit into that. That is the overall strategy, the Republican outlook.
It's but that is all about learned behaviours as well, Neil. You know, a great documentary years ago when one of these Attenborough ones were the whales that were going on the beach and grabbing seals right off the beach because they'd learned, the only school in the world that does it, learned behaviours. Now, if we look at over to our friends in Ireland or France, I mean, they've got the retirement age by 2 years. The place is still burning. They're out there every day, and they'll keep going because they've got revolution in their blood. You know, and you know they beheaded their royal family. And when they didn't like the revolution, what we on to Republic number 5 now? They don't like it. They change it. In Ireland, who it's fair to say probably had the worst treatment of all the Celtic nations by the English, they had to fight and fought for centuries, and it's in them. They won't take it. I would say, in Scotland and in Wales, we're kind of, a revolution, match the days on tonight. Could we do it tomorrow? Or Strictly Dancing's on, maybe. How about Thursday? A week on Thursday, I can come out for a wee riot then. We're absolutely cowed, Neil. Yeah,
but then that's the poison of devolution, and I campaigned, obviously, for the Welsh Parliament and devolution from a very young age. But there's a devolutionary class now, and they're earning great money in the public sector, far too much money, to be honest. And I went to Liverpool, when was it, 2 years ago? Spent a bit of time, I was working up there on a legal case. And I loved the city, was great. And it reminded me of what Cardiff used to be, a really colourful working class city. Whereas now, I think with the advent of devolution, there's a really snide new class of people who look down upon most other Welsh people, to be honest. And they live a very privileged life with 18% of the overall population voting Labour. Because, I mean, one of the things that I've always been about is increasing turnout. And I noticed what John said about turnout there in the north and the north of Ireland. And I mean, here in Wales, 55% do not vote in Welsh elections. There's the win line. And that's what it's about. And when we have our public meeting in Ely and other areas, this is the whole point is motivating people, enabling people, and getting people into the political system. And keeping an eye on I'll be frank as well, keeping an eye on voter corruption. Officially, I mean,
Neil, could I just say that an awful lot of the new Sinn Fein voters are people who weren't voting before. There's a lot of what we call them slums in Scotland, I suppose, but inner city blocks of public authority housing. There's a lot of that in Dublin, and by and large, they were ignored.
Yeah.
But Sinn Fein go in there on a regular basis. And they're getting a huge vote out of it. And it's also having another consequence, that the far right have no ground in Ireland. They have no weight at all, because where they would have got votes, Sinn Fein have taken them off them, and Sinn Fein are completely anti-racist.
Oh, great to hear. Lloyd, do you believe, I mean, I made my point, I believe that there'll be a United Ireland will be the first one to break. Will it cause two things? Will it cause a domino effect for the other Celtic nations, do you think? Or will it make London all more determined?
I'm never comfortable with the domino effect concept, because I don't really see where it's happened anywhere in the world, to be honest with you, other than, I think the world's focus is going to be on Britain. Britain is going to attempt to retain itself in some form. I think they'll let Ireland go a lot, or the north of Ireland rather. They'll let that go with a lot easier than they'll lose Scotland, for one simple reason. We are the money. We are the money and the energy. The north, I've thought for a long, long while, is more about Britain's concept of itself, its status. The days of protecting the unionist or the loyalist people are long gone, long gone. It's interesting, the statements from British ministers in the 70s and the 80s are radically different from any of the things they're saying now. They will let Ireland go because in some ways it's a drain. We're not a drain. Neither is Wales. England needs Wales, and most importantly needs Scotland. But there's also the issue of Britain, how Britain sees itself in the world and how the world sees Britain. If there's a domino effect, I think it's a matter of everything falling down at once, more a house of cards than dominoes bumping each other, because the focus is going to be on that negotiation that takes the six counties back into a united Ireland. That will bring the world's focus onto us. What we need to do is we need to have the arguments prepared, the campaign prepared, not piggybacking on Ireland, but understanding that Britain is breaking up. The six counties becoming part of a united Ireland is breaking up this United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, as it says on your passport. That in itself will bring questions about Britain's position on the Security Council of the United Nations. It brings whole questions about, unfortunately for the people of Ireland, whole questions about their relationship with NATO and neutrality. But for me, our politicians need to think about what the steps are that are going to happen over the coming years and how they can exploit that situation. And they can only do that if they recognise we fight on the same ground as Sinn Fein, not on the same ground as Westminster political parties.
Here. Neil, the UK, I would suggest the Union since Brexit has never been weaker. And now is the time, really now is the time for all the independence movements within the British Isles to make their move.
Yeah, I mean, it's an opportunity. The sort of the mischievous side of me wanted a campaign for Brexit, knowing that it would cause chaos. But Wales voted for Brexit, though. I mean, what is interesting is those people, many people don't vote, did vote in the referendum to leave. And it was based upon a severe unhappiness. So what I'm finding interesting is a lot of people who voted to leave the European Union are very receptive to the idea of a free Wales, because it's about sovereignty, which is why we, as a party, in terms of language, we tend not to use the word independence or independent Wales, because first of all, we don't feel that anybody is truly independent. We're all interdependent in some way. But the idea for us is individual sovereignty, community sovereignty, and national sovereignty. And it's the idea of a journey for us, because we're in a process of educating and agitating, and then, and then getting a result, hopefully. But so it is a process, really. And I think people that voted to get out of the EU, probably with a very British mentality in a sense, are very receptive to the idea of a free Wales, a sovereign Wales.
Yeah.
It's really
wasn't the Wales geographically as it is with its voting sort of split on Brexit? Was it not the nationalist voters were tending to wanting to remain, and it was the incoming vote, vote that did the damage?
Not so much. No, I mean, it was more the working class wanted to leave, and the more affluent middle class. Because I think the part of the problem of the Yes movement here, it's generally a very middle class movement, and quite exclusive, and is not inclusive of all communities, really. And that's a challenge they need to overcome. But I think it was the vote split more on class lines, I believe, really. Linguistically, you could say, obviously, Welsh speakers did vote to remain. But I think it's more nuanced than that, because there are nationalist people out there who they just don't know it yet. That's the whole point. And I think we've got a big job of education to do. And I think what we do, John, we go into the communities as well, and we go into those blocks of flats, and we speak to people. We try and get the damp sorted out, and try and be a voice for the people who don't have voices. And that's got me into a lot of trouble in politics. I mean, it's got me suspended several times in bumping up against authority. But unless we do that, unless we enable people, then we're simply not going to win what we want to win.
John, out of the British Isles and all the countries, including England, Ireland did best out of Brexit. I mean, it seemed to give a boost to Ireland. I mean, for example, suddenly all those ferry routes direct to the continent, and not bypassing going through the UK, and a lot of jobs moved over to Ireland away from the UK. So it actually worked well for Ireland, did it not?
It did very well for Ireland, because not only that, but if you're in Northern Ireland, you can actually trade with the EU, and you can be separate if you want to. So, the best of both worlds. You can have whatever Britain is doing, and you can have whatever the EU is doing. Now, mind you, even though that was a great benefit, some unionists were against it, because it put a border in the Irish Sea, an imaginary border, which, was too much for them to accept. But they do accept it now. And I think once people are doing well financially, all things become possible.
We've been talking about, what we all need to do is to get into the Sinn Fein against success, Lloyd, in the working class areas of Ireland. Neil's saying that's happening in Wales. In 2014, we went in to the schemes, etc. And we signed up a lot of people, and we talked them in because they were the people who would have benefited and will still benefit the most from an independent Scotland, Wales, or reunited Ireland. But we let them down again because we didn't get independence. It's going to be a harder job this time round to convince them once more, to give us one more vote, so to speak.
I'd have to disagree with you, Roddy.
Good.
Because 2014, the number of people, I worked very specifically in one of the, what would be termed, a deprived area of Edinburgh. I worked in an area which has a huge sense of community, but has been left to build and be its community itself. No one's been interested. Over that year-long campaign, we successfully managed to get 65% of the people to vote for independence. And the principal reason was they felt like they were being treated as adults. They were being asked a straightforward question, a big question, and they understood, very clearly understood, the quantum change that would come in the event of our independence. If you ask those same people again the same question, they will come out in those numbers. They will, because they feel let down. They felt let down by, I have to say it, they felt let down by the middle class. Here in Edinburgh particularly, well, I'm not actually in Edinburgh at the moment, but that was in Edinburgh. The division between the working class and the middle class is clearer than it is anywhere else in the whole of Scotland. And people were saying, we want the same. We want a better life for our kids. If you treat people like adults, they will come out and vote. But when you give them a pick and mix bag of policies at an election, they'll not come out in the same way, because they know that when it's the pick and mix and not the straight one question, that everything will be reneged on. In the area I'm talking about, we had the highest turnout at any electoral event since 1971 in 2014. It was up close to 80%, which is astonishing in a working class area in Edinburgh. At the following Westminster election, it dropped by about 3%. Those people still came out and voted for the Scottish National Party candidate, giving a huge majority as we got in all the Westminster seats. But at the next Westminster election, they didn't turn out. They turned out for the Scottish Parliament election and indeed increased the majority of the sitting SNP MSP. But they've been historically not turning out for general elections because general elections don't touch them. Sometimes our political class forget the sophistication of the working class people of this country. The Scottish Parliament does things that they see tangibly on a day-to-day basis. The roads, the NHS, education. These are the issues for the Scottish Parliament. What does Westminster do? They don't see the point. If you said to them, into the next general election, this is a vote for independence, they'll come out and vote for that. But they won't come out to just send a bunch of professional politicians back down to London to bump their gums for another 5 years. They're not interested. They get no benefit.
I agree with them. I wouldn't send them down either or vote for them. We're coming towards the end of our time, gentlemen. Just sort of to round it off. Neil, what are the next steps for Wales to move forward?
I think we need an inclusive yes movement, and we need to get the idea of a constitution on the agenda all across Wales. So we're looking at organising a series of meetings and highlighting what happens in other countries. And I think I went to Scotland in 2014, and it was a really inspiring experience. And do you know what was most inspiring to me was speaking to so many young people that want to change. And I think what we need to do is, more than anything else, motivate people that we can change things. And the only way by doing that is educating and organising. And that's what we're going to try and do.
I wish you well in that. John, I know that Sinn Fein are working way behind the scenes every day to make sure they keep their core vote up. But what's the next steps on the road to reunification?
Well, it'll be a delicate matter because, say, unionist commentators will talk about a certain problem within the unionist community. I mean, they haven't fully come to terms with the fact that the union is over, despite the vote that happened in the council elections. that's something that will take a lot of psychological approaching. And we'll have to be very, very sensitive about how we do that. I mean, one thing that struck me before was that it'd be very useful to be able to have a very close relationship with Scotland, because Scotland would have the exact reverse in terms of religious affiliation that Ireland as a whole would have. You know, this wouldn't be an important thing normally, but it's not normal in this country, you know, and it's something that could be useful.
Well, don't send them over to Scotland. Send them down to England. Those that feel upset, let them have them. Lloyd, Scotland, where do we go now? What's going to happen? What do you think is going to happen next?
I think the SNP will be forced to meet the concept of a convention. I think that in the short to medium term, that's where we have to be moving. But with the current leadership of the SNP, I can't see them making that move because it will weaken them. But that's what has to happen. And if they're not prepared to do that, then somehow we have to get a constitutional or an independence convention together, bringing together the yes groups, ALBA, ISP. If the SNP as a body doesn't want to attend, but we ask individual SNP members. But what we're really looking for, Roddy, and we've talked about it on the other programmes, we're looking for the membership of the SNP to take possession of their party again. If that happens, then we begin to move rapidly. If not, somebody else is going to have to step up, and maybe that person would be able to be seen on debate night on the BBC tomorrow night on BBC Scotland.
Good advert, sir, Mr. Salmon. Gentlemen, thank you for your time. You're into it. I don't know about the rest of you, but I can see a lot of similarities, particularly between Wales and Scotland. Not so much our cousins over in Ireland, who we've already determined are the senior Celts of these isles. We'll have to get a contact in Cairn now, I suppose, and because we've got to keep united, because that's what I think we need in Scotland and in Wales. And I'm envious in a nice way of our friends in Ireland of the solidarity, of that unity, unity of purpose, and it's what we all need, that, you know, so that we can all get ourselves reunified, independent, back where we belong. And that's what I turn up for every day. Gentlemen, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you've enjoyed this as much as I have. And I'll see you all again at the weekend. But to you and yours, please, take care.
Thanks, Roddy.
Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.